Chapter 3. Osak showed up for work the next morning, still nursing a headache. He had taken Tylenol for the headache before driving out to his office. Osak had an office secretary named Barbara. She was white, 22 years old, and fresh out of college with a degree in business. Barbara did administrative tasks and organized Osak's schedule. Her office was next to Osak's. She could eavesdrop on him if she wanted to. Osak tried to work, but he was distracted for several hours by the pressure mounted on him by his parents over the circumcision issue. Osak needed someone to talk to, preferably from his hometown association. Just before he called it a day and left for home, he placed a call to a kinsman who was also a member of the hometown association. Ovu, the man Osak called, had come to the USA about 10 years before Osak's arrival. They shared a lot in common, though Ovu was older. They were both accountants. They were married to white women, and they shared the same birthday, a day they often commemorated with an invitation-only dinner hosted by their wives, Ingrid and Sarah. Ovu was mild-mannered. Osak noticed this quality in him during hometown association meetings when most members engaged in shouting matches and Ovu would watch in studied silence. Ovu often upbraided the combatants after tempers had cooled and he was given the floor to speak. He was respected because he was among the older members of the association. Osak had sought occasional advice from him, but they were mostly about professional matters in their common accounting profession. He had never sought personal advice from him before, but he felt the urge to do so now on the circumcision pressure from his parents. "Hello, Ovu," Osak had greeted. "How are you? This is Osak." "I am well, thank you. And you?" "It's well, except for heavy pressure I feel about something, and it's causing me so much distress. I'm not sure what to do." "What is it?" Osak opened up to Ovu for the next 10 minutes about the discussions with his parents and his dilemma. "What would you advise me to do?" he asked Ovu. "Well, thanks for deeming me possessing other wisdom to advise you on such a thorny matter. It's obviously been eating at you from the anguish in your voice," said Ovu. Ovu had 4 boys with Sarah, and so had never dealt with this kind of problem before. His boys had all been circumcised, but male circumcision was an optionally acceptable medical procedure. Ovu continued with his response. "I would have asked you to ignore your parents, were it not for your unique status as a prince and heir to the throne. You are in the special class of people, along with your parents, who are custodians of our culture and heritage. This means that you can't shirk from carrying out what custom demands of you to do, including this circumcision. As abhorrent as it is to me, you have to do it to save yourself from the backlash of supernatural powers associated with our hometown and its culture," said Ovu. "Ovu, your take on this is a big jolt," said Osak in response. "You asked for my reasoned opinion. I gave it to you. I by no means think it will be easy to do, particularly as your wife is white just like mine. I know your wife will probably oppose it very strongly, and her reaction might even get you in trouble for even contemplating such a thing. I think you're very correct about that, said Osak. It's a tough situation for you, no doubt about that, said Ovu. Give me more options, Osak asked in panic and frustration. Well, you could ignore your parents, but with the caveat I gave earlier about a supernatural backlash. You could also lie to them by telling them that you've taken care of it right here in America, and there was no need to return home for it. But this is also problematic because your daughter is supposed to be Oa, reincarnate, and must be taken home for the ritual ceremonies to welcome her back. Osak sighed aloud such that Ovu could hear him from his end of the line. He sensed Osak's supreme frustration and angst. I must confess I don't envy your situation at all, Osak. It's a difficult one, for sure. Would you do what you are recommending to me if you were in my shoes? Osak asked. I am not a royal like you, and so will never be confronted with a situation like that. But if I were in your shoes, I would, said Uvu. The phone conversation was within earshot of Barbara, who heard it all from her adjacent office. Osak, exhausted from the day's work and mentally fatigued from his issues, had kicked his legs up on his desk, switched his cell phone onto speaker mode, and had placed the phone on the desk. Barbara knew Osak's wife had given birth to a baby girl a little more than 2 months ago. She had met Ingrid a number of times when Ingrid had stopped by the office in the downtown area of Washington, D.C. to pick up her husband at the close of the workday. Ingrid worked in the Georgetown area of the city, about 10-minute distance from Osak's office. Barbara had also seen Ingrid when she was pregnant and had even attended her baby shower. Barbara thought the discussion was bonkers as she listened to it. She had not paid much attention when the conversation had started with mundane stuff about their hometown association's matters. Then the conversation had shifted to circumcision, and Ingrid's daughter was mentioned. At that point, her jaw dropped, and her ears perked up figuratively to listen intently. "Holy shit," she exclaimed softly when the conversation had ended. Barbara was aware of female genital mutilation and its practice in certain parts of the world, particularly in the developing world in Africa and in the Middle East. She had been shocked to learn from a Turkish friend about the practice in certain traditionalist regions of Turkey, which was a highly developed European country. But carrying out something like that in America would definitely be illegal, which could cause the government to seize the child from her parents. And so she hoped that Ingrid would block it if the issue ever came up. Felicia was baptized in the 6th month of her birth. The events took place at the local Catholic church, followed by a party at Osak and Ingrid's home, attended mainly by the kinsmen of Osak and their spouses. This was the second time Osak's kinsmen would be hosted at an event in his home, the first being the house warming party which had taken place 2 years earlier. Ingrid recalled that even though they had been invited to make merry and celebrate with her and Osak on the purchase of their new house, but they had also brought with them their association's issues, and a few people had quarreled. That was her first time of noticing the strident passion in them about issues concerning the association and the source of her husband's mental exhaustion after his return from their meetings. Felicia was rolled into the basement in her stroller to be seen and appreciated by the party guests before things got busy with music, drinking, and partying. Sarah, Ovu's wife, was there with Ovu, and she quickly bonded with Ingrid and two other white women from Ingrid's office. The Africans spoke in their language, effectively shutting off conversation with the Americans. So the four white women congregated at the far end of the basement and made lively banter. Sarah and Ovu had been on a safari to Kenya the previous year, and she regaled the women about her experience, particularly a fight she had observed between a python and an adolescent male leopard. The leopard instigated the fight by thinking that the big snake would make a nice dinner. It attempted to bite the snake, which reacted so fast and coiled its powerful length around the leopard within seconds. The leopard struggled mightily to escape the grip and was fortunate to do so, but it kept harassing the snake until it slithered into a hole in the ground. "Wow, that must have been quite a sight," said Joanna, Ingrid's office mate. "I'd love to go on one of these safaris. But here is a strange story my husband told me about pythons," said Sarah. "In his African hometown, it is revered as a sacred animal that they do not kill. Pythons come freely into homes and depart as they please. They harm no one. Anyone who killed a python was subjected to banishment from the community until they paid diviners heavy sums to cleanse the land of the sacrilege they had committed. My husband does not think anyone in the community has any memory of the last time a python was killed." The woman's mouths were agape as Sarah told the story. "I thought pythons ate anything that's living, including people," said Joanna. "Apparently not in this African community," said Sarah. "Have you been there before?" asked Frida, Ingrid's other office mate. "Not yet. We plan to do so next year." Joanna had been nodding to the DJ's selections. The women appeared to be itching to dance. Ingrid led the way to the dance floor, where they gyrated for several minutes to a mix of rock and African music. They had company in several others who had been on the floor for over a half hour, jamming excitedly to the music. At the other end of the basement, a group of Osak's kinsmen conversed over the din of the music. They were 4 in number. A burly, bearded man was speaking. "What is he going to do about the girl's circumcision?" he asked his colleagues. "What do you mean, what is he going to do?" a bald-headed, slim man retorted. "Did you do that to your own daughters, who were all born here in America?" he asked, rhetorically. "Why raise such a useless issue here?" "Well, I'm not a prince like he is, so I am not under any obligation to have it done to my daughters," protested the bearded man. The third man in the conversation was heavily mustachioed. He stroked it nervously as he opined in support of the bearded man. "I had 2 girls before coming to America, and the procedure was done to both of them. It is our custom and culture, which no one should condemn or take away from us." The bald-headed man countered, "I know you have 3 girls. Your last girl was born right here in America just last year. Did you do that to her too?" he asked, with a look of scorn on his face. "No? Why not?" "Well, we couldn't do it here because it is supposed to be illegal here. and I thought it was too expensive to fly her, her mother, and me home just so we could do it. I hope she doesn't become promiscuous because she isn't circumcised. The last sentence in your statement is total bullshit, protested the bald-headed man. Why do you pin promiscuity on only women? What about men? Study after study has not established more propensities for promiscuity in women than in men. If women should lose their clitoris based on your unfounded claim, then men should lose their tools too, because women are no more promiscuous than men are. There was laughter amidst the charged conversation. The fourth man in the group was Osak's close friend Ovu, who weighed in with a comment. I think it's a very difficult issue for Osak to deal with. He will make the decision he thinks is best for him. You have no opinion on what he should do? The bearded one asked. Again, he will make the best decision for himself and his family, Ovu insisted. You're always on the fence. The bearded one shot back. The mustachioed man was the newest member in the group, having arrived in America only 2 years before. He did not therefore know Ovu that well when he asked what everyone thought was a silly question. Ovu looked older, and the mustachioed man had imagined Ovu had both male and female children. I bet your kids are all circumcised, he stated, rhetorically. Of course they all are, said Ovu. Then why are you on the fence about what Osak should do? You are older than all of us here in this group. Older people have a greater responsibility to promote our culture regardless of where we live in the world outside our ancestral homeland. The bearded one jumped in. Mr. Ovu has 4 boys. He has no girl and therefore has never been confronted with this issue before. He has the luxury to sit on the fence. Oh, okay, that explains it then, said the mustachioed man after learning about Ovu's family. My earlier assumption had been wrong. The party now roared as Osak and Ingrid grooved to a popular African tune. Ingrid used to be lost in the kinds of moves that rhymed with the rhythm of African music, but she learned the right moves over time as she attended parties hosted by her husband's kinsfolk to celebrate a graduation, a birthday, a wedding, or a baptism, like the one she and Osak hosted now. She thoroughly enjoyed herself at these parties. She was in awe of the members of the association, who were all high achievers. They were physicians, lawyers, nurses, and many other progressive things. They all seemed to know why they were in a land of opportunity as America, and they took full advantage of it to get educated and raise solidly middle-class families. They were very good people who were upwardly mobile. Her only issue with them was the highly contentious meetings they often had relative to their developmental aspirations for their ancestral hometown in Africa. Osak had once taken her along to one of these meetings in the first year of their marriage. The spouse of a member was an automatic member by virtue of the association constitution and had voting rights. Ingrid observed firsthand the dynamics of the back and forth that characterized these meetings. After the president, an elderly gray-haired man, had gavelled the gathering to order and an opening prayer was said, pinkish brown nuts, the size of chestnuts Osak had told her were called kola nuts, were served. She had tried eating one before, as Osak loved to munch on them occasionally, but it had been too bitter, and she had spit it out. A young man passed the kola nuts around. He got to her and Osak, who picked a nut from a wide and shiny tray. Ingrid demurred, but before the young man moved on, Osak asked to be allowed to take Ingrid's share. He now had 2 nuts, and within seconds was crunching them in his mouth, making a loud, crunchy sound. The president called up the first substantive issue on the agenda after the last person had been served a kola nut, and it was about whether to renovate a 70-year-old secondary school in their hometown built during colonial times by Christian missionaries, or demolishing it and building a new one. A dichotomy of views soon emerged on the issue, and they engaged in, at times, very loud argument. 2 men had almost come to blows on the matter and had to be restrained. Hours were spent on the issue to the neglect of the rest of the agenda, but in the end, a vote taken on the issue was won by those in favor of tearing down the old structure and building a new school. On their way home, after the meeting had gone over its scheduled period by several hours, Ingrid told him she thought the fuss was all unnecessary, considering that a vote had been planned all along. Why hadn't the debate proceeded decorously, without the rancor she had witnessed? Well, we practice our democracy like that, said Osak. It is no different from American democratic practice, you know. I would disagree with you on that, Ingrid retorted. Osak was an ardent student of American history. He had read up a lot about America after his decision to move there for higher education. He was particularly enamored of Abraham Lincoln, America's 16th president, who freed the slaves. He recalled reading Lincoln's biography and learning about how the slavery issue had caused so much national heartburn, such that a senator who had supported abolishing the cruel commerce in human beings was attacked for holding that position by a congressman on the other side of the issue and nearly killed, and the assault had occurred inside the U.S. Capitol. What about that? Osak asked Ingrid, who smiled. That happened so long ago, she countered. America is a much different place today. The basement started to empty out in the wee hours of the morning. Felicia's baptism party had been a smash, thoroughly enjoyed by the attendees. Before activities were formally closed, Osak had asked Ovu to give the vote of thanks. Ingrid and Osak thereafter made small talk with their guests as they departed one after another. Ingrid soon went upstairs, leaving Osak with the last 1 or 2 people left to depart. Ovu was one of them, and he had a question for Osak before leaving. Ovu pulled Osak aside to ask if he had made a decision about the circumcision matter. Was he going along with the option of claiming falsely to his parents about doing the procedure in America, or would he take Felicia home for it, he queried. Ovu: how can I even do this? I cannot tell Ingrid about it without her probably murdering me. I can't lie to my parents about the procedure being done here, because this thing about reincarnation rights requires of Felicia to be taken there for that activity. My only option looks like me taking Felicia there and pretending to be doing so to introduce her to her grandparents. But I'm not sure Ingrid will let me do that, as Felicia is still a baby. Ovu's face bore a sign of anguish for his friend, who equally displayed a pained visage about his dilemma. She might agree if we all go together, so she'd be sure that Felicia would be properly cared for. But I am pretty sure she will resist any attempt to take Felicia from her for circumcision. I am also leaning towards ignoring my parents henceforth. I might even cease communicating with them. You can't do that, Osak. What about your princely status as heir to the throne? Are you going to throw that away by cutting off from your parents and your roots? I would, for the sake of my wife and daughter, said Osak, seeming now to take a firm stand on the matter for the first time. The conversation between the two men lasted for over an hour as Sarah waited in the car for Ovu. They were the last of the party guests to leave because of the impromptu conversation. Sarah was sleepy and longed to get in her bed. She was thus slightly irritated at her husband for keeping her waiting in the car while he talked the night away with his friend. She tooted the car horn a couple of times in frustration. Ovu's attention was drawn the second time, compelling him to bring the conversation to an end. Okay, my friend, he said, as they both took slow steps towards his car. Let's talk tomorrow. Good night. Thanks for coming. I appreciate the company, said Osak. Ovu got in the car, started it up, and slowly drove off as Osak waved goodbye. You took so long, complained Sarah. I need to go to bed. I'm sorry about that, Ovu apologized. What were you guys talking about? Nothing much. We were rubbing minds about the state of our hometown association and our quadrennial elections coming up soon. Ovu had lied to Sarah, for he couldn't guarantee that the circumcision issue wouldn't be leaked to Ingrid if he had been truthful and told Sarah about it. Ovu felt slightly sleepy from the wine he had consumed at the party, yet 40 minutes of driving lay between him and their home on the outskirts of Baltimore City. The roads were almost deserted at close to 3 a.m. in the morning as Ovu drove about 12 miles above the speed limit. He had been driving for about 30 minutes with another 10 to go when he approached a speed trap set up by a patrol officer holding a radar gun in his right hand. Ovu braked abruptly to slow down, propelling the seat-belted Sarah forcefully forwards, which woke her up, startled. What's going on? She asked, as Ovu slowly drove past the patrol officer, who made menacing eye contact, but fortunately passed on, coming after Ovu to conduct a traffic stop. That was close, he said to Sarah. Were you speeding? She asked. I guess I was. I've never received a speeding ticket before, and this is my 17th year in America. I like that unblemished record and want to keep it that way. Ovu pulled in front of their garage several minutes later. Their children, ages 4, 8, 10, and 12, were sleeping soundly when the automatic garage door had opened. Jennie, the 12-year-old, was awakened by the noise, and he opened his upstairs bedroom window to look. He had been traumatized a year ago when their home had been burglarized by amateur burglars who had pried open a back door to the fenced backyard. It had happened in the morning. The burglars had assumed the occupants of the home were either at work or at school, if the owners had school-age children. They had struck at that time of the morning, but their assumption was off because Jennie had the flu, and had stayed home from school. He was laid up in his bed upstairs when he heard the strange noise akin to a key being unlocked with great difficulty. He got up and slowly made his way downstairs to investigate. There he came face to face with the burglars who had just gained entry. They were two grown boys who turned around quickly and escaped through the same back door they had broken and entered from. Johnny quickly called his dad and the police, who arrived on the scene within minutes. Uvu was mightily glad that his son was unharmed, but he also admonished him for failing to turn on the home alarm system while he slept. End of chapter 3.